Okay, then maybe we should start now. And hello. Yes, my name is Muruga, and professionally, I'm editor of the graphic design and typography books and magazines, and have worked for an IDEA magazine about 20 years. So it was. So I get acknowledged with Tomas then. And yeah, I have worked sometimes for Art Easy program, whatever. So I was asked by Nakajima-san to kind of as an interviewer to ask you about BDBD, more kind of general introduction, and what its brief history and some contemporary trend or your comments about the contemporary trends of Dutch bookmaking, whatever. So I know that you're Esther as a representative of BDBD now. And,
yes, I am.
Yeah. And you were how long have you worked for the committee? Or
for the committee?
Yeah.
5 years ago, and in 2016, I was installed as a director. It's a very small company. Well, it's not a company, it's a foundation. So 5 years, and that is also the time that I met Thomas Castro. And one of the first things that I did was to install next to the professional jury a student jury. And I was very glad to meet Thomas because he really was enthusiastic about the idea to bring the future generation of bookmakers in contact with the already renowned makers. So we know each other as well. And in that time, I think Eelco, we've met each other then, but maybe before as well. I don't know. Yeah. So 5 years, and but I know the foundation much longer. But that's
So you have worked as an editor or director for
director, not editor. No, no. I'm much more the person who coordinates things than. And what I coordinate is, of course, is the jury itself. And then if there are proposals for abroad international expositions, I do that as well. And of course, the production of the catalog.
I see.
So those are the three elements of the award. And yeah.
So you are now focused solely on the BDBD program. You worked full time.
No, it's not full time. No. I wish it could be, but no, it's 1 day per week, and the other 4 days I work with another foundation who is there in the Netherlands to promote reading and promoting books. So I am in the book business, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. And
you're welcome.
Eelco, you are the director of the NAI010 Publisher. Yeah. I love the publisher. Yeah, I often buy the book. And you all was a jury for the last contest of the BDBD program, right?
I wasn't.
No. Oh, you didn't?
No.
Okay. But have you basically checked all the results?
This was a question to me?
I'm sorry?
This was a question to me?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a bit confusing. Sorry. It's very difficult to interview over Zoom. Anyway, it's okay. Yeah. So we are still.
No, it's working fine. We'll help each other.
Okay, sure.
We'll get there. No problem.
So Eelco, could you let me know your involvement with the BDBD briefly?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, fine. No, I was asked by Esther to join the jury. So I think this is the third time in a row. Yeah, so this is the third time. And as a publisher at NAI010, we always say that the design of our books is not an embellishment or an afterthought, but is a part of the content. So it's, those are not separate things for us, because we publish and work for the design community, like architects, graphic designers, and also the art. So I always worked in a field where the design of books was a serious business, was content. had meaning. So when I got asked, it was just a sort of a celebration. It was really like going to a party. You're being able to review like 300 or 400 books that are so wonderful and so diverse that it cured my every thought that books are in this internet age are done for or anything like that. The sheer vitality of what you encounter if you are in the position to review all these wonderfully designed books is really uplifting. Yeah. So it was really something that I did with so much pleasure, and I learned so much from what you saw, and that's why I spread them out here, and they're like friends. Yeah. But they tell you things that you don't know. So I think it's a testament to the vitality of book design to be to do this work. I think it's really great. So yeah, that's my experience.
Thank you. And Thomas, and you're the now director of the graphic design program for the Stedelijk Museum. And how
we don't, it's not a director, it's a curator / conservator. In English, there's not really a good word for conservator, but so we translate it to curator. But basically, I'm in charge of the graphic design collection at the Stedelijk Museum. It comprises 43,000 objects, which is huge.
Too huge. Yeah.
Through the whole history of graphic design in Holland, of course, internationally. Amazing works are in there. It's like every time I look at I go to the depot and look at the collection, it's like being in a candy store for me. So yeah, and as Esther said, I got in contact, of course, with her in 2015, 2016 when she asked me to help along with other heads of departments of the art academies to think of a way to bring young people into the discussion of books. I think what Esther said at that time was when she, as the first-time director, went to one of the openings, she just saw a bunch of gray-haired people.
Look at me now! Look at me now! Yeah.
With honor, right? It's nothing against people with gray hair, but
no,
of course, looking. Yeah, I mean, the tradition of books. That's what Eelco is really saying. Has to be brought to the future generations of designers, readers, the market, whatever. And so, and that's when we decided to, among other things, have a student jury. But also, as a designer myself, we entered books before, or we've had books selected in the selection. So, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with the best book designs competition.
Murago-san, maybe I should explain. We have a jury with five people, and they represent different fields of the graphic industry. So we have two designers, we have a printer. And in the last couple of years, we also have the seat of that's filled with, it's for the Stedelijk Museum. So Thomas will be on the jury the coming years. And we have to think about how long or whatever, because every jury member can only be 3 years in the jury because we want to have it switched. Something like that. So Eelco, it was now your last time, unfortunately, but that's how it's worked. So Thomas will be one of our jury next year. I'm very glad. So
I see. So BDBD has a quite long history and tradition. And as you just mentioned about the younger generation, so how the organization or the prize had been let's say recognized or perceived as some kind of a general impression. It's more kind of more old or long and gray-haired committee, or I'm of course I I know there's many new young talents, upcoming designers involved in the contemporary prize. But could you let me know the kind of brief history and how it was established in the society? Yeah.
Of course. Shall I tell a little bit, a short history of how we started? Because it was already in 1926, and it was initiated by the designer, Mr. De Roos, Sjoerd De Roos. You know him probably, and he awarded with his jury 50 books because of their aesthetics and their craftsmanship. And craftsmanship, you could say, about good technical production. And in those days, there were two purposes, or two goals, purposes. It was to educate the public what a beautiful book was, and probably more important, to stimulate publishers to make better and more beautiful books. Back then, publishers often didn't have a designer, or they left the design to the printer, or they did it themselves. You can't imagine that now, but those were the days. And De Roos had a vision that the book needed really good typography and that it was made by a professional. And he used the best Dutch book designs, the organization of it, as an instrument to reach that purpose. And he took the idea from America. I think it was 1923. They hold a similar competition with 50 books. So he took over that example.
Oh, really?
But it was, so the main purpose was to inform the public what a good book was. So it was really a kind of educational purpose, and of course the publishers. And then in the 50s there was a shift. You see that then there was really a need to promote the good quality of technique in Dutch books. And the thought behind that focus was, if you don't pay enough attention to the technical form of a book, what does that say of the content of the book? So they wanted to establish really a firm connection between content and execution. And that strong link is still today. But it was really so meant that the best Dutch book design, was really meant as an example for the bookmakers, for the book industry. And in the 60s, the purpose shifted to give a representation of what is going on in the field. And that's still today. So the award in the first instance is meant for the people who work in the industry, in the graphic industry, and secondly to the public. And if you say how it's perceived, well, in the business, in designers, publishers, printers, binders, they really contribute to the collective feeling of this prize. It's really their award. So it's really looked at as an honor if you're now part of the selection.
Interesting. Before our interview, I asked my Japanese designer, graphic designer friends working in Amsterdam, Ayumi Higuchi, about some kind of background of the BDBD. And this is one of her questions, not question, but she mentioned about the original naming of the BDBD in Dutch. So fair zorge, fair.
Verzorgd.
Verzorgd.
Verzorgd, yeah, and that is it's like the curator thing that Thomas just said. It's hard to translate it. Verzorgd means. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So that could be one of the important point to explain the mentality or spirit of the awards.
Yeah, I think it's very important to stress that the best Dutch book designs is not all about design. Of course, it's one of the main part. Not only not only design, but we look at, or the jury looks at the execution as well, and also at the publisher sides of things. The books are often made in commission, and how does that work? What's the context of the publishing? And I have here, what did I say? Yeah, I think if you kind of questions are, what's the role of the publisher in the design or in the execution? Is it innovative? Is it a commercial edition or a one-man edition? And what's the print run? What is the target group of buyers, and how does the design and execution of the book comply with that? How is the book funded? Did the publisher take daring decisions? If I look at the last jury reports, often a remark that you see from the jury is, it's so daring for this publisher to make this book, to bring it out there. So that is taken into
consideration.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas, thank you. Yeah, so it's design, it's publisher, and then of course the technique. And that's so funny because the Roos is of course one of the arts and crafts movement, and that craftsmanship is still a part of the award today.
Interesting.
And I would, no, just to follow up on what Esther was saying, I think what you can say is that back then at the Roos, there was this idea of elevating the standard of book production. So there was really, a sense of, almost of a government promoting, good books, like the government promoting good architecture led to the best architecture book. Of course, if you concentrate too much on craftsmanship, you lose the idea of concept. And so there's also, I think, a creative tension between this idea of craftsmanship and, having sort of a definition of what a good book is, and standards of artistic freedom that, that don't look at the printing quality in the same way. It could be a little bit tedious. So I think those tension between the artistic freedom of the graphic designer and this idea of promoting good books has always been there, and I think it's always a topic within the jury. You got people that are pulling the side of artistic freedom, and if it's not properly bounded, I don't care because it's such a strong concept. And on the other hand, of course, there are also technical people like a printer who really will look at the binding of a book and and make a judgment on that. And I think those two elements are really a constant source of positive tension.
It's the main part or the essential part of the discussion, isn't it?
Always. Yeah.
That's why it's so interesting.
It's interesting.
I think for me, it's also one of the most important things to understand about this book competition, or it's actually not really a competition. It's a selection, you can say. Is that because nobody really wins? You're selected for the last that last selection of 33 books, 30 to 33 books. But for me, the most important is this idea of this holistic approach to a book, right? So it's what Esther and Eelco said. You look at the design, you look at the production. Basically, you look at all the facets that make this object exist. I would even say that for me, as a designer, for sure, the publisher is important. But even before that, the writer or the initiator of the book, whether it's the author, the artist, the curator who initiates the book, is as important as well, because without this interesting how do you say that, the content, it's really difficult for a designer to do something about it. So it's this holistic approach to this object that it has to be readable, it has to be a good object in your hand. I think one of the things I really liked about the jury report is their kind of dismissal is a big word, but they were really critical about the selections that they called paper porn. So that a lot of, let's say, well-designed good designed book competitions are just concentrate on this, how many papers can you use, like what kind of crazy bindings can you use, all these things, which it doesn't really make for a good book.
No, exactly.
It makes for an interesting design object, but is it a book? So I think that's, to me, as a designer, what is a really interesting thing that sets apart this book selection.
Yeah, I was very impressed to read the comments, your jury's comment about some criticism on the trendy book binding and some fashionable typography. But we can agree. So there are many mannerism, or there's many methods, experimental methods, and now shared and very common today, and they very like to use it sometimes. So I'm also sometimes invited to work as kind of jury for the design prize, but the discussion mainly focuses on some kind of formal criteria of the book design on the aesthetical aspects. So my question is how you could, I didn't know how you actually discussed over the prize selection, and how could you let me know some, let's say, actual situation, or how you proceed the selection?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there is a formal element, and maybe Esther can follow up if I don't represent it correctly. But there's a huge list where he keeps his notes, and then in the first instance, you compare the notes of difference, and then you just count. You count how many juries asterisks a book has, and you take out it has at least 2 or 3 jury members, asterisking the book, and then so you bring down the selection this way, and after that the discussion starts. So you have the sort of a pre-selection or a long list on the table, and then the discussion gets interesting because every jury member has an opportunity, to state his or her choice, and then the discussion starts, and then you bring it down, and usually there are maybe some books that everybody agrees upon. It's sort of an extra is if the jury is unanimous. That's sort of an extra honor, maybe, if you will. And then of course there are other ones that have a clear majority. And then there's this section that may or may be in or may be out. And so in the second round of discussions, it really gets interesting, because you really have to articulate why this book is in or out, and you even have a sort of a special card to play. You can reintroduce a book on the last instance that you really feel that should be discussed. So it's always very exciting, this last part, especially because you really have to, you just have to convince your fellow jury members with arguments, and having a jury with on the one hand like printers, a publisher, designers. It's very clear that you have these different perspectives of the book. So that's in a way how the process goes, and it always is very good that you have to make choices in the end. There has to be some books that are going to fall off the table, and I think that's a vital part to have to choose. Means that you have to articulate your arguments, and that's in a way how it goes.
I see.
And when I was mentioning that these 2 aspects of artistic freedom and craftsmanship, you could say that's the horizontal part of a cross, and maybe the vertical part I think is also very important in best design Dutch book designs. There's more or less the commercial scale, you could say. You could take an artist book maybe in a print run of 20 copies. That's the one end, and on the other hand you could use like a trade paperback made for millions. And because you have to allow, you can't have every paper, you can't have every choice if you're producing really a mass market book. So that's the other tension. You have to discuss those types of books, and I think that's also very much an essential part of the prize. And I think it's also, as a publisher, I think it's very important to take the target audience, the public, into account, because personally I'm sometimes, you know, if you make a book for so little amount of people, you know, what's the relevance? I like it when there's not every option available technically, but you still want to reach a very good wide audience with excellent design. What can you do? And I think that's really interesting. So you know, you always see those two scales come into play in those discussions.
I see. Interesting. And also, how you let's say there are some 5 or 6 categories, or so depending on the, let's say, an art book or some business book, or there are some, let's say, division of the groups.
Yeah, there is a division. We have some categories, but they are mainly to get some focus for the selection. It's not that every category has to be represented. So if children's books is one of those categories, but if there are not well designed or well produced children's books, it's not going to be there. But to have categories in the first instance, it forces the jury as well to think in that commercial scale that Eelco was talking about as well. And of course, it's for the people who are submitting their books that they see, okay, well, it's a whole wide range that we're looking at. So it's not only about art books. It's about the book production of a whole year. So and what's going on there? What's you know, that's the thing.
It sounds rather very difficult to judge all the categories of the books. Maybe I could only do for the art and design books or photographs. So maybe it's very, So it's quite interesting aspect of the awards.
But sometimes you see trends in the in the art books. You see them coming back in a different kind of category, or the other way around. So that's very interesting. But we have to be honest. The category of art books is the most elaborate category. So yeah.
Okay. And I understand the requirements of for the entry for the BDBD is what to say, two publishers are Dutch, or the designer or Dutch. So there are some, what to say, not what to say,
Shall I elaborate on it, Moraga-san? There were the criteria. We have 3 elements that we look at, just in the jury process, but also in the submitting. So you're looking at the design, the production, and the publishing. And 2 out of 3 has to be located in the Netherlands. So if a book is designed by somebody in Japan, but it's printed and published in Holland, it can be submitted. And it's not only about printing, we also look at the binding or the lithography. So, and that has to do with the situation now that a lot of international commissioners are coming to Holland because they like the specific qualities of printing or binding or lithography. But the publisher itself stays, of course, is international. But I don't want to miss those kind of books because there still is an essential Dutch element. But of course, because of the whole globalization, internationalization, international, you get at a point, okay, what is Dutch? Of course, that's the question. But these are the formal criteria for now. So
that's quite unique aspect of the, what to say, the prize for me. It's a very what to say, it's something between global and local. And
still I get a comment, I get criticism of designers who said, but I designed the book, but okay, it's printed and published elsewhere, but still it's designed in Holland. Why can't it be part of the jury? Those are books that are in between because they can't be submitted in any country. So where are they? So it's rather interesting to think about that, how we're going to treat those books. But we have a lot of national competitions. I think everybody is struggling with this kind of criteria. And we still didn't mention the international competition. Of course, we have in German it's called the schönste Bücher aus aller Welt, so the best Dutch international book designs. And I think it's about 600 or 700 books that are submitted from 31 countries. So, and only if you're part of a national selection, then you can be part of that international competition. So that's interesting as well, of course, the whole global thing to look at different kind of aspects. And Holland, of course, I'm proud. Oh, sorry, Thomas, you go.
No, I just wanted to say that there's that distinction again where the German competition uses Schönste also in their whereas the Dutch competition really uses that word verzorgd, meaning overall taking care of something, whereas the other one is more the aesthetic. But I'd like to add, if you'll allow me, Muruoka-san, I'd like to add also a little bit to what Esther is saying. To me, as curating the show for the first time for Stedelijk, I also, what I really I'm interested in this competition is the way it also mirrors the way Dutch design, let's say, the Dutch design community now is. I mean, Esther said, what is Dutch design? I myself, as a Philippine American, practicing in Holland now for more than 20 years, am I a Dutch designer, or am I a Philippine designer or an American designer? But when I look at the selection, it's amazing to see that there are so many people who have either studied or through their working in Holland have decided to settle and start a practice in Holland from wherever they're from. And now we're part of this selection. So I see, even for the first time, I think, and maybe Esther or Eelco can correct me on this, but I see other languages, not only Western European languages, but I also see Chinese and I see Japanese in the selection.
Japanese,
I see exactly one of my favorites, and I see also. A lot of designers from different parts of the world who are now practicing in Holland, making up the selection as well. So it's not only, let's say, this idea of the white Dutch designer, but it's a multitude of voices that are being heard now in the book industry, but also in the design industry.
Thank you for your comment. That was exactly I really wanted to ask you.
I read your mind, Muruoka-san.
It's coming to us, Did you remark that as well, Eelco? Because you were 3 years now in the jury. Do you see, this trend as well?
Absolutely, and in two ways. You see, like, I held this book up because this Dutch Japanese artist going to Japan and exploring some topic there, and I got another one, which is a Japanese graphic designer that is settling in Holland and tries to read the Dutch culture and the Dutch ways. So you got this merging of migratory streams and people going, Dutch people going out and other people coming in, but also in terms of subjects. You see there's globalization in the subjects as well, exploring, exploring migration, exploring international subjects, exploring identity. So it's very much, not only a phenomenon within the design community, but also in the subjects that you encounter. So
I'd like to correct you a little bit, Eelco. That last book is from a Chinese designer.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Chinese.
You're right. I'm sorry. You're really right. Yeah.
Thinking about the history, it's been 400 years of Dutch-Japanese relationship, I think, when Japan opened the doors to the overseas. So it's quite a long tradition, by the way. Okay. And
Muruoka-san, can I ask you something?
Sure.
I'm also curious how you or Japanese designers look at the Dutch design. If you say Dutch design in Japan, what does it mean? What kind of associations are around that term?
Interesting question. Dutch design is somewhat kind of mystified or what to say, it looked maybe many young Japanese designers follow the trend of the global trend, which started from that designers, I think, or some Dutch designer, maybe not real actual Dutch design, but some kind of imaginary sphere, I think. It's often, it is not only in Japan, but it's much more global trend, right? Use of the, what's it, design like Carol Martins or something like that, the big bold typography and what to say. It maybe you should check the I forgot the name of the American graphic designers who wrote about the article about global style, not international style.
Mm-hmm.
International style, in contrast to the international style in the 60s or 70s, now we are facing the kind of global style in after 2000 or 2010 with much more, what to say, use of the maybe something next to the postmodern style, but it's much more common trend in Korean designers or Dutch designers or American designers. So yes, the Japanese designers, so somewhat young designers not so much aware, but they follow the kind of Dutch trend, I think.
Well, Thomas, can you elaborate maybe, because you had a lot of students from, I think, Japan probably and other Asian countries.
Asian countries, yes.
What are they wanting?
I think
they suspect to find in Holland. What do they want to learn if they're coming over here?
To find magic, the magic.
Okay.
I think Moroga-san is. Are you talking about Jeff Keedy? That's
right. Jeff Keedy's writing article on global.
I do think we have to be careful now talking about this idea of global style, because I think with kind of the notion that we understand now today, it could also be misconstrued as a kind of design colonialism, right? And that's something I think we have to be careful of. Is especially my role as a teacher. I want to be very respectful of where students are coming from. And yes, there is this thing where they come to Holland and they say, "Oh, I want to design this Arnhem style, the Werkplaats Profil, Karl Martens, like you said." Even I was one of these people. I came to Holland because I really appreciated Karl Martens' work in the late 80s and early 90s. But I think it's also important now to look at the diversity that we can find in design and different cultures, and say, maybe this Western grid is not the best grid to design in other languages, and maybe these grotesque or Gothic fonts are not the best fonts to choose, for different purposes as well. So I think we're past that moment in design history where the West have
supremacy
had exactly in design, and I think it's now more interesting to see where the canon can be refocused, and of course I think again this is where I think Dutch design or Dutch designers are very good at opening themselves again to these new conditions and new contemporary challenges. And so the discourse within the design schools and I think creative schools in general and the creatives in general in Holland are very open for these conversations.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thomas, can I ask you, talking about the question of, is there something like Dutch design identity? It's being deconstructed as we speak in a way. One could argue that some kind of anti-authoritarianism would be part of a Dutch design identity. Like, if you get a commission, in Germany, maybe they say, yes, thank you. And in Holland, they say, well, but why? That was, maybe part of the myth. Do you think there's, is there still something in that? Or is it just wrong? Or should we get rid of it? Is it just going to dissolve in this, new thing that we are about to discover?
I think you put a good point to it, because a lot of times when people look at Dutch design, they consider it an aesthetic layer or some sort of a set of design choices that lead to the Dutch design. But I think Eelco has pointed to one of the most important aspects of Dutch design is the idea of questioning. And that is stylus, that transcends all kinds of aesthetic choices or anything. But just the first question at school, we tried to teach the students to ask the hard questions, especially towards their clients, their commissioners. Because that's where a lot of the interesting choices start. Is that you want full color? Why? You don't have that budget, so why should we push for full color? You want a small book. Why? The images call for a bigger book. These kinds of hard questions that you have to, in a way, argue it out. With your client. And so this very Dutch notion of being argumentative, of being very discursive in a lot of things, and just questioning why things are, I think is part of this notion of what you could call Dutch design. Which I like, because it has nothing to do with style.
And it's not only I think the dareness or the to ask a question, but it's maybe also the status that a designer can be an art director. I mean, he's the one who questions, but he's also the one who picks all the elements around it, who's the printer and whatever. But it's more kind of, if I talk with the designers, I mean, for example, Hallerbrunn, the book in the selection is The Cycling Shanghai. They are, of course, from Switzerland, and that's what they say. We really have to, how do you say it? That art direction, to take that part, that's still really something for them. It's not natural. And they do it, of course, and they do it very well, but just to underline the things that you're saying.
Interesting.
It's also something that if you study design in Holland as a foreigner, it's hard to replicate this when you go back home, because you are not designing in an island, so you're part of this general culture, and in a lot of countries, it's not a designer's place to question your clients, especially if it's a bigger or more influential client. A designer still has this subservient role to that. And so I think it's also interesting how these young designers who are studying in Holland and going back to their own cultures are trying to find their own ways within their systems to apply the knowledge that they have gotten in Holland. And I think that's that's an interesting part of this kind of spread of ideas as well.
And Thomas,
Murago-san, you talk with a Japanese designer. I said you just said, I think, was that a part of the discussion as well?
Oh yeah. Japanese designers. I'm sorry.
No, I thought you said earlier that you talked with a Japanese designer in Holland to talk about the Dutch design.
This. Yeah.
And did she or he mention? Yeah.
She mentioned about that. Yeah. And
okay. Yeah. So she recognized what we are saying now.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. And I would like to ask Thomas how the book design, the discipline or the category as a book design are institutionalized. I mean, how do you teach book design in your school, or how young designers learn? Or
well, I mean, first of all, I'm not yeah, so I'm the new conservator of graphic design in Stedelijk, and that means that I left my function as the head of departments in Arnhem. So I can't speak to what the new my old team are doing now. But what for me was really important is we kind of approach it in as an introduction first to the basic attitude of, let's say, typography or how to produce words or text. So we don't even, for me, it's really important not to talk about the book as an object yet, because it's very complicated. It's like an architect trying to design a whole building without still first understanding the small parts. So for example, Team Thursday, who teaches in Arnhem, they have a really interesting lesson that they call the Character Club. Yeah. And basically it's first year's project, huge pieces of paper, black ink, any kind of writing tool you can think of, and just make characters. You're assigned one letter, one glyph, and you can just keep making the same glyph weeks on, weeks in. And in the beginning, I think young students are like, why the hell are we doing this over and over again? But then slowly they start to understand, oh, now you start to see what a pen stroke or a stick or a rag or a twig, leaves, what all these tools actually, how it sets a mark on paper. And then slowly we build that up. So I think in the second year, then somebody like Jeremy Janssen, who's also was in the jury this year, then takes it over and says, okay, so now let's talk about conceptuality, paper. What does paper choice? How does that what are the concepts that you can do because you make a paper choice? What does offset paper? How is that different than glossy paper or calendared paper? He has a lesson called the 5 obstructions, where based on Lars von Trier's 5 obstructions, he basically gives each student a random set of 5 obstructions that the student will have to try to design something. So it's like, okay, it has to be a certain size, using this paper, using only this font, using this binding style, and it can only be one color or something like that. And so then it teaches the students to look at all these different aspects of book in a conceptual nature.
Interesting.
I want to begin again. My God, I would love to do this education, to have this education. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
Geweldig.
Interesting. In Japan, it is very hard to become a professional book designer because there are only not so much, let's say, position for become some kind of proper book designer. I mean, employed by the big publishing company or the kind of traditional book publisher, right? But young people found the book as a new form of, media or self-representation. And of course, now you can make a book more easily, or with much DDP and some more easy and cheap reproduction technique, or the printers. So so that could be why the younger people are much more and more focused on the book as their own media. So they start their own self-publications. So how that kind of this could be not only in Japan but much more, let's say, global trend.
Yep.
And how that kind of trend are reflected, or how I'm curious. My simple question is how you observe the contemporary younger generation's design trend on the book design. What do you think about the any change of the book design or book making in the last 10 years or after post-internet generation?
I think that Thomas and Eelco can elaborate more, but the thing that I notice is the love and the wish to comprehend the craftsmanship again. So and you see a lot of young designers self-publish as well. And of course you see also, I mean, not the younger than, but older designers who start their own publishing company. So those are really trends from the last, I think, decade.
Yeah.
But maybe Eelco and Thomas can elaborate.
Well, I would agree, Esther, and I think one of the things that we saw happening in the last 10 years is that as information becomes more digital, books become more physical. So you get, if you look at young designers, they're really excited about having an opportunity to make a printed book. So they really explore, and dive into these possibilities. If you got a sort of an appetite for binding styles, for paper choices, for printing, for ink, because in RGB you could also do so many colors. So it doesn't translate well in the screen, but this is a fluor color, and it's not for nothing. They really explore all the possibilities that you have within a physical book, as opposed to everything being digital. And that's one of the things that I see, and that I think it injects a burst of energy in bookmaking from really young people, and also a sort of shared sense of excitement about these possibilities that are not digital, that are not about screens, but are about physicality, about paper, about bindings, about ink, real ink. I think that's what we're seeing. Yeah. And by the way, it's a true, very, very valid point of Esther to mention that we're seeing also a trend in publishing where artists and designers become publishers. They're going to self-publish books. So self-publishing, I think it's also very an important aspect. It has to do with freedom of speech. Everybody can be a publisher, and I think that's a very important thing. So it means that that the entry level for publishing, there is no entry level. Everybody can do this. So the most outrageous experiments you can do if you think you can find enough people to buy your books. So and the really interesting trends, I think, that we're seeing for a large part come from these self-published, and of course some of these people really start doing good businesses like Roma publications, for instance. They're slowly moving towards real publishing, like towards maybe mainstream. If we wait for another 10 years, maybe they are the establishment, and there's new people coming up. So but those are the trends that I'm seeing.
Thank you.
Thomas,
can I add something to that? I think that what I really love about the selection this year is in the extension of what Eelco was trying to say, is that when you look on one side of the spectrum, you have these like amazing institutional, huge, big budget books like whether it's from Joost Groten's what's the grand
project,
the grand project,
Yeah.
and the book from Irma Boom, the Rijksacademie, the Rijks Museum.
Yeah, Rembrandt.
But on the other hand, you have these really tiny, simple books that were done on small presses, Riso machines. Eelco showed 2 of them already. The Japanese book from Ayum Gucci and from Chen Zhen, the book about her lunches basically at the studios that she's working at. So I love this spectrum where the jury is also still encouraging young designers and young publishers to say, hey, in this competition, you have a chance against these major names, because it's all about like the creativity and your vision, and so one of my favorite books in the selection is the Van Vera Gluckers, the Riso. I think it's only an edition of 100.
The threading book, Eelco, do you have it there?
Yeah.
Maybe it's nice, Thomas, to let it show.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just exudes, professionality on one hand, but personalness on the other. And I love this, that this is standing next to the major publications like the Richard Prince book from Coma, which is like layers and layers of production values on top. Yeah.
But still, it's nice to have, I think you need the context also of the big commercial ones.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, but what I'm trying to say is
encourage
that,
the younger ones. Yeah.
To
be just part of the whole. Well, it's kind of cultural heritage, of course, in the end. So.
I was walking around the exhibition a couple weeks ago, and I saw, I didn't have my Stedelijk Museum badge, so I was kind of just one of the visitors. And somebody was mentioning that book, the black and white book from Vicky Caro and do I pronounce it Soji or Soy?
Yeah, Soji, Korean.
That one. And it's saddle stitched, super simple, one color, and somebody was saying, why is this part of the best Dutch book design?
Yeah. But that is funny,
again, like
Thomas, because
the content, go ahead.
Oh no, because I got criticism, of course, from different kinds of people, and the one end is the one that you're talking about. From why is this in the selection? And on the other hand, of course, the people from the other one, the commercial books. Why this? Why is this so innovative? And I think it's very good to have the discussion in the jury, and then of course that the public discusses with each other and the industry as well. I
think you need, to take a metaphor from another industry, you need independent films in order to push boundaries. These small productions can be a little bit more daring in their choices. They have smaller budget, they have smaller production runs, so they're able to experiment a little bit more. I think one of the reflections of the current idea of young people in terms of what Eelco was saying, this digital age, is, for example, the use of super black inks or triple tones and duotones, and there's a whole generation of designers used to looking at black from a laser printer or from an inkjet, and of course, as we know, offset black is not that black. But there's a confluence now of all these books that are super black, and I don't know, I can't prove it, of course. Eelco, you can maybe say a little bit more exactly about that, but I have an idea. It's because people aren't used to this kind of normal black anymore, and they just want to pump up the colors more and more to kind of go against what they're seeing on their phones and on their computers. Another thing that let me finish. And then, another thing that I noticed is something that the jury mentioned about using lighter papers, and these amazing folding styles. And to me, that has to do with making a book dynamic. The book is being forced to compete with YouTube, with social media like Instagram, with TikTok, and a book in itself is maybe just a static tectonic object, but using these transparent papers, using amazing folding styles, you make a book very dynamic, and it becomes an animated object almost in the hands of the public. And I think that's another trend that I can for sure, say related to the digital and social media trends of the youth.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eelco.
No, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying there, Thomas. It's really interesting. I would say that the black ink, maybe to me, falls into the category of having the opportunity to explore with inks like fluor, like blackness, and no doubt that they're used to other kinds of blackness, and they're exploring this. But I also think it's a very good point that you were making about the dynamics of a book. And I think the book as a performative object, I think, is also one of the main trends that we're seeing. And this is one.
Oh yeah.
Hans Gremme. This is one of an absolute gem in this respect, because this is a book that is designed as a folder. It looks like something you take out of a folder. Of course, it's about the school shootings, but the performative aspect explores. On the one hand, you could read it like this. Very, very simple idea with brutally just staples through it, and it's a very brutal way. At the same time, it's extremely intricate and well made. But you could go through the book like this and read one story, and then in a sort of dramatic thing, you could also prise it open. And then you got the mementos from those school shootings that were archived, and this kind of really a physical performance in leafing through the book takes on meaning, and it becomes dynamic, as Thomas was saying. So this performative aspect is also, and we didn't mention it until now, but that's a major trend, and that we're seeing. And I interpreted this as also a sort of an anti, or a counterpart for the screen and the screen experience, that you have a real experience with the physical object. Yeah.
It's the same with the I like to mention it as well with the catalog, Murago-san. This is designed by Team Thursday, and the performative element is really in this one as well. Well, it's really stupid to have it like this in the screen, but yeah, it's the same kind of. You have the beautiful Korean photographs, and then you have to. You see the book as well first as an object, and then you open it up, and then you have the jury report, and if you want to have the English, you can turn it around. So you have to have some activity to understand the book and to get it, and that's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I really want to grab a copy.
Really, yeah. I will send you one, of course. I will send you one.
Catalog. It's a beautiful catalog.
Yeah, I love it. And I think, of course, it becomes interesting if these aspects are applied in a meaningful way, like we said about paper porn. You could use the performative aspect also as a sort of a circus feature. Like, look what we're doing.
Yeah.
But if you do this in a meaningful way, which we hope the books in the selection do, then it takes on meaning. And I think that's the defining aspect of having these performative books included in the selection as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those are the more complicated. Those are the more complicated dynamic elements. But you have also the translucent or transparent papers, like that one, the book from Shenzhen with her lunches, because it's kind of a diary style. Then you get like a glimpse of the past and a glimpse of the future. So it's almost like this timeline, visualized in an animation, let's say, or even the one that I was just talking about, the Vicky Caro and Soji. It almost has this flip book quality, because you see the type. You can also you already see it in the screen. You see the in Dutch Weerslag. I don't know how to.
But you see it's shining through, and
So there's almost an animation while you flip through the book. It's
and then the choice of paper is part. Yeah, and the choice of paper is part of the concept, so it's not some trick or thing, but it's really part of the.
So simple.
Yeah. Agree.
Murago-san, there's one thing that we're not talking about, because it's so good, and so that we have young students that explore everything that's around them, but also we need young people at the other side, at the execution side, and that's really a problem now in the Netherlands, that there are not enough young people who are interested in that side of the graphic industry. So we have a very good binders, for example, and usually they are a kind of family company, but there is no future generation. There is a generation, but they don't want to work in that department. So that's a thing that worries me, but a lot of people in the so on the one hand you have the designers who wants everything and want to explore, and we need that for the future of the book, but we also need the other side. So that's a bit of a problem. I don't have the solution, but I think it's good to mention it as well.
Yeah.
It is there.
Yeah.
What do you maybe Eelco, did you discuss in the jury what could be a possible future for books? You mentioned that you were actually, you felt assured that there was a future for books.
Yeah.
But now Esther also is expressing some kind of not doubts, but some thoughts going forward in terms of the market and the production of books. Did you talk about that as a jury?
Yeah,
we did. We did, and I think it's very much an open question. So I absolutely wouldn't know. But what's encouraging is to see really young designers exploring all these aspects of bookmaking. On the one hand, and on the other, there is the concern that there are a lot of elder printers that don't have people who want to take over because printing business is in decline. So that's a concern. In terms of what the future of the book, it's a very nice question, but I think what you can say is maybe from my experience anyway, is that we had this idea of a sort of a crisis, let's say, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. There was this feeling. I was really, at parties, people would go over and say, "Oh, I hear you're a publisher. Poor guy. You're still doing books." No, I'm not kidding. And it was like 8 to 10 years ago, and then it didn't happen. Where there is ebooks, but there is still physical books, and so there was this idea of what we're seeing. It's sort of maybe even sort of a revival, a reappraisal of physicality of books, and that's where we're here now. But I really have this. It's not static. The situation. It's really evolving. And I just don't know. I really don't know what in 10 years' time will be the position of the book. I honestly, but I'm really curious to find out. But I don't know how your students are looking at this, Thomas. Are they still, signing up for being for wanting to be a book designer, or do they want to have it in their portfolio, or is it just this 1 or 2 quirky students that that do this stuff still?
Well, I think it's like just like any population demographic in a student population, you have people that gravitate more towards the analog design. You have students that gravitate towards digital design, and I think it depends on your kind of like your point of view, your interests, and things like that. But for sure, it's not a dying theme. This idea of book design publications, it's actually more it kind of like it gets more interesting because kind of what Esther was saying in the beginning, publishing is getting easier. So you can print, use like a lot of these laser printers are so good now about printing, or you can even print white in a lot of these laser printers. So you have all these amazing printing techniques. The Riso can print really well. And then binding, you can buy binding, you can cold glue a book really easily. So a lot of students are using a lot of these techniques in their own experiments. But I think for me, I can see 2 scenarios maybe among more that I can describe now. One would be this thing where book design becomes, the book industry becomes a kind of a boutique industry, just like letterpress is, where you have a lot of people that still do letterpress. It hasn't disappeared, but it's not necessarily a very widespread medium now. And actually, it's more like for the aesthetic, right? For wedding invitations and special announcements kind of thing. So it becomes this cottage industry, but that's not what we want the book to be. On the other hand, you have another trend towards this kind of craftsmanship. So you see this in coffee shops. Baristas are, like basically looking at every aspect of the coffee, how to extract the beans, how to grind, blah, blah, blah. But this has taken a very wide acceptance in the public. So we have actually an overabundance of coffee shops now, and it's very still accepted by the public. So I'm wondering which direction the book will take, whether it become a cottage industry that just starts operating in the margins, or does it go into this other side where it becomes almost like a thing for artisanal experts, but then still has a connection with the public in general.
One thing that's remarkable is that a lot of younger people, vloggers or influentials or whatever, who do all their daily business digital, that they still want a book to talk about their efforts or whatever. So as long as we have that aspect, as the image of the book, that you want something tactile, whatever, as long as that is still around, that feeling, and that is around, I can see it now in all the lists of books that are published. I think that's encouraging, but still,
Maybe one thing to add. Yeah, I think I agree. Yeah. Maybe one thing to add that might be interesting is the position of art books and photography books, and I mean artist books and photography books. One of the things that in this crisis 8 or 10 years ago, the Dutch government, in its art subsidies, scrapped the publication subsidy, reasoning that everything is digital. We want to support the artists, and these publications are they're not the future, so we scrap them. And with one stroke of the pen, as a photographer, if your artwork was going to be a photography book, not a book about your work, but a book that is the work, you were out. You could, and as a painter, you could do like a sort of an art project, a painting, and apply for subsidies. But if your art project was going to be a book, you were being scrapped, or we rebelled against it, and we won because. But the interesting point is, what happens to these artworks where the book is the artwork, like a photography book or an artist book? I don't know, but you could say that I don't see a reason why that should not continue and be meaningful.
You see a lot of crowdfunding between surrounding this kind of projects. And I think that's a very nice trend as well, because then you involve the public beforehand instead of I think this book is important because of I think it's important, and let it go out there and see if it's true. But now you get a whole different kind of process. I think that's interesting as well. So And
I think a couple of years ago I was in a jury examining student work from the photography department of an art education, and you got the category of single photographs or series of photographs, and photography books was a category of its own. And I'd like to think that the photo book section was by far the most interesting section with student work. So maybe. I think it has its own. If you consider the artwork to be the book itself, then it becomes a different identity, maybe.
Exactly.
But I think these photography books, Eelco, are also, especially at the academy level, a lot of the students who are graduating from the photo students who are graduating from the photo academies or fine art academies, they're making their graduation usually is a book is part of their graduation, but they're just printing it digitally and binding it like at these small or at this digital shops. So I think there's also this verschuiving, this kind of move towards also as the technology gets better, the printing technology and the binding technology gets better in terms of like the immediate, the smaller shops, digital binding, digital printing, it starts to compete with with the traditional offset or book industry.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting point, and you could see this as a sort of fluidity in terms of print run, where you get one copy, or you get 10 copies, or maybe 100, all the way down to 100,000. Technology allows you this. So that's a really interesting point for me as a publisher as well, because you're a publisher always traditionally thinks in print runs, and we are, as a publishing house, moving away from the idea of a single print run towards the idea of an audience and how you reach that and in which ways. Because with maybe a single copy photography book that forms part of an art project. By the way, that's also a trend we're seeing, that books are part of a larger art project. You could reach maybe a huge audience with its digital representations, with reviews, with talks like this, basically. So when you stop thinking in print runs and start thinking about audience and reach and how you reach the audience, the book also gets on a different position. And that's from a publishing perspective, one of the most important trends that we're seeing. So we're really, as a publishing house, concerned with curating this environment of a book with the aim of reaching an audience with a certain message or topic or content. And the book forms part of that, but it isn't like we're going to reach 1,000 people because we're making 1,000 books. That is really gone, that idea. It's really, maybe we can reach 100,000 people with this one book, with this one copy.
That's good.
This idea of print on demand, then, you mean?
Yeah, that's also, it's very funny. It goes against every traditional idea of a publishing. You have to calculate your print run. If you're wrong, then you could overprint or you're being out of stock. And with POD, it's just one copy, one customer, and you go along. It's very funny. Yeah.
Would a print on demand book ever make it to the selection of best Dutch book designs?
Oh, I wouldn't know why not. Only I would say that technically the POD machines are very limited. In terms, you got like 3 types of paper, 3 types of binding. That's it. So if you really would go for an 100% POD produced book, it would be very difficult, I'd say, because you just can't elaborate in terms of inks or papers that much. So yet it's so limited. It really has, all you have to is graphic design, but I wouldn't count it out. But I would say, if there's a nice publishing strategy or an art strategy behind it, like a direct connection with the people that are ordering the book, of people maybe influencing the kind of book that you get in POD, then it becomes interesting. That would be, would be maybe an exciting thing to explore.
Actually, how could you tell me about the proportion of the entries of the BDBD books? I mean, are there many small print run editions, limited edition books, or let's say, or there's much more major mass published books, or what could be the proportion?
I think we because we have these categories.
You see, you're shifting. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, like this is like children's books. Obviously they're large print runs, and like the Rezo print, like this was, I think, was 100. So I think we really had wanted to explore the whole spectrum. So I think it is really from tens of thousands of copies to 100 or even less. And it was really a wish to at least have all these kinds of books at the table, not exclude like artist books that are under 100 copies. We wouldn't want to exclude them, and we really want to examine the mass-produced books as well. We really wanted to present and to evaluate the whole picture. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But
maybe Esther, you can discuss a little bit.
Yeah.
Know that
Thomas,
that you have different rules, I think, for student submissions as well.
Yeah, we have everybody who submits a book, Murago-san, has to pay a fee. Yeah, I think it's a small fee, but anyway, you have to pay a fee. And we would like to have the students as well to send in their publications. They can do, and we usually need, if you submit a book, we usually need like 7 or 8 copies. And with students we make a kind of exception, or at least we tell them if your book win or is part of the selection, then you have to produce a couple more, because we have exhibitions abroad or whatever. But I think we can win there, Thomas. There is still not a lot of student submissions. The other way, I think 3 books now of the selection, I think that's the first time that 3 books are from an academy, and so made by students.
Yeah, this rule.
Or do you mean something else?
No. This is what I mean. But I think also that the idea behind that was to also, have the students, if they have print-on-demand books, that they are allowed to, print it in, to send it in.
Yeah, because to be part of the main discussion, because that I remember that was the thing that you said, and I think that was very good. Be sure that their books are part of the main discussion, and another strategy was to have another kind of competition only for student books, but then they are apart from the rest, and it's just more interesting to to compare them with the whole book industry.
Okay, thank you for all the great discussion and comments. And we are maybe it's about time to closing our discussion towards the end. So maybe we could lastly talk about some future prospect of the BDBD or the book design in general, or whatever. Maybe we just discussed now, but
yeah, we just discussed it. Yeah.
But how about the next year's program? It's still what to say. Are there any difficulties in judging?
I don't know if that well.
Oops.
Esther's camera is.
It's frozen.
Yeah. Sorry, is something wrong?
Your connection is a bit choppy.
Frozen.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't have much. I don't have much to add. We're going on. Of course, for me, the problem every year is, do I have enough budget? Because of sponsoring, and but we're going on. So
okay, I'm
looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to next year's as well. And
speaking for me, as representing the Stedelijk Museum, the best design books, the best Dutch design books have been part of being exhibited at Stedelijk since I think 1932 or something like that. So it's one of the, I think, if not the longest running recurring show at Stedelijk. So I think it's important to know that there's always going to be a home for the best Dutch design books at Stedelijk. I think as a curator, I think I'd be interested to also in the next edition to see how we can also present the student jury selection. I think that's for me a very interesting development, in the sense that on one hand you have the professional selection, and the other hand you have the student selection who are selecting from the same group of 300 plus books, but the selection is slightly different. So it's interesting to see what the young designers, what their interests and their kind of provocations are. There's of course a Venn diagram where there's a lot of overlap, but like borrowing Eelco's axes, I think that's an interesting axis from one end of the spectrum, from the professional jury to the other end of the spectrum of the student jury, and to see what other kind of selection that they would come up with. So that, I think that would be something for me to look forward to next year, to find a way to include the selection as well somehow.
Okay, thank you. And
maybe what I would say, looking forward, is I would hope that the design community, like young graphic designers, and that's also what we try to do as a publishing house, doesn't shy away of tackling the big subjects of our time, and like what we're seeing, like identity, migration, all these topics that are really relevant to people, to address these in book design. I think that's an important, maybe an important ingredient for a mix that would stay away from this boutique industry that Thomas was referring to, and being able to stay within
relevant.
To stay relevant, stay within the society, and be a part of relevant discussions. And basically, it is what we're seeing. And as a publishing house, I'm really looking forward to publishing these books, and I think that's still possible.
Okay, thank you for all the great discussions and yes, comments, and yes, I hope there are many audience here, but now we are only. So now, thank you for your audience.
Nago-san, thank you for your questions. Yeah, thank you for asking.
ちょっと質問が上がってくる前に、じゃあ僕から一つ質問をさせてください。
So now we are waiting for the question, but now Yusuke will ask you a question firstly.
ベストブックデザインっていうその英語をオランダ語で表現したときになかなか英訳が難しい単語だっていうふうにおっしゃってた単語があるんですけど。
So in the talk, you mentioned that the original Dutch name of the award, the best Vertolkt Bloken, Vertolkt. This is quite a difficult notion to translate in English. So could you talk a bit more about that original meaning of that Dutch title?
Yes. Verzorgd is hard to translate. It means that you look at three aspects at the book, not only the design, but also how it is produced. And you look at how it is published and why it's published. So it are three aspects. So it's not only the design, and that means the Dutch word verzorgd.
まず、オリジナルのそのオランダ語の時は、Vertolkt というような単語でこのアワードは表現されています。そのアワードの意味というのは実は3つの言葉が含まれています。デザインだけではなくって、その本がどのように制作されたか、そしてどのように出版されたか、この3つが、そのアワードの意味には含まれています。
質問が今、2つくらい来たので、じゃあ早速、質問をさせていただこうと思います。まず1つ目が、コロナのウイルスの、影響っていうのが、オランダのデザインシーンにどのような、影響を与えていますかっていう、例えば、ローマンパブリケーションとか FW っていう、出版社が実店舗を開いてたりするんですけども、こういったそのローカルの動きっていうのは他にもあったりとか見直されていたりとかするんでしょうか。
So there's a new question here, and could you tell us about the influence of the COVID-19 to the Dutch design scene? So, for example, we've heard that Roma Publications or FW Books, they have started their own stores in Amsterdam. So do you think that kind of locality is now re-evaluated again, for example, or is there any kind of movement after the COVID-19, do you think, to the design scene?
Well, the main example are you. I mean, the Tokyo Book Fair is now online, so of course there will be consequences. And I think that Roma and FW are very innovative thinkers, and yeah, I think there are more possibilities, more hybrid forms to interact with each other.
そうですね、もちろん、コロナウイルスというのはオランダのデザインシーンでも影響はあります。ただ、一つ顕著な例としては、その東京アートブックフェアがバーチャルで開催されているということ自体が、非常に顕著な例なんではないでしょうか。そして今、例に上がったロマンパブリケーションズであったり、FW ブックス、こうした出版社や本屋というのは非常にイノベーションに満ちた人たちですよね。そういう意味で彼らのような可能性のある活動というのはこれからもどんどん生まれていくと思います。
じゃあ、次にもう一つ質問が来ているので、それもお伺いしたいと思います。そのオランダの本を作る、シーンについての質問なんですけども、そのオランダにある製本だったり印刷の技術っていうものが優れたものなんじゃないかっていうふうに、本を見てると感じるところがあるんですけども、何かその本のプロダクションの部分でクオリティが高いっていうのは何か歴史的な背景があったりするんでしょうか。
So second question is that about the historical background of Dutch book design making, because we know that there are so many good printers and binders with excellent quality in the Netherlands. So do you think is there any historical reason or background for this book industry?
If you want to know if there's a reason for the quality?
Yes, yes.
Well, of course, the Netherlands have a very long history of bookmaking. But I don't really know why the quality is that good. I know it is very good. And I can see that a lot of people from abroad, a lot of international people are coming to the Netherlands to use that quality. But really the reason, I must be honest, I really don't know. I'm sorry.
それでは質問にお答えさせていただきます。確かにオランダには素晴らしい製本ですとか印刷の技術があります。で、これを求めて海外から人たちが来るというのも事実ですね。しかしながら、これにどういった歴史的な背景があるのか、それは非常に答えるのが難しくて、この場ではちょっとお答えするのが難しいです。申し訳ありません。
Yeah, and I can add that we have a very lively book market because we have there are so many books sold. So there was a lot of how do you call it? Room, a lot of room to develop and to be innovative. So there was money. That probably helps as well. So if the book market is okay economically, then of course you can expand. And you see now the book market is going down. People are getting older, and this is really the problem in Holland, that there are no future generations to set forth the quality. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So, 先ほどの回答に少し付け加えて回答をさせていただきます。というのも、オランダには非常に素晴らしい本のマーケットがあります。なので、本がよく売れるんですね。そういう経済的にマーケット、市場が豊かですと、その本自体が発展したりですとか、イノベーションが起こったりする余地があります。そういう意味で、オランダでは市場もありますし、本の技術というのも発達してきたんですね。しかしながら、今、本の市場というのは少し低下する傾向にもありますし、そしてその本の業界を担っている人自体が少し高齢化しているということは問題です。なので、将来の世代がいないというのは私たちにとって少し問題ですね。
あともう一個、ちょっとこれも僕からの質問になるんですけども、オランダの本の、なんていうんですか、作る時の、座組を見ていると、デザイナーの役割っていうのがすごく大きい印象を受けるんですね。それでオランダの本作りにおいてデザイナーの役割がすごく大きいのっていうのは何か、例えば教育的な 面だったりで、影響があったりとかってするんですかね。もし何かエステルさんがご存知なことがあったら教えてください。
So there's a new question from Yusuke, and we would like to know that in the Netherlands, when people are making book, the role of designer is quite big. He's taking very big and important role in bookmaking in the Netherlands. And
Yes.
do you think, is there any reason or inference from, for example, the education system or any other reason? Why they take that?
I think it's a very cultural element of the Dutch people in the Netherlands. If you look at our educational system and you compare it with our neighbors, the Belgian, in Belgium there is much more a high hierarchy. Do you know what I mean? A very top-down system. So if you have a student and you're sitting in the classroom, you keep your mouth shut and you listen and you hear. In the Netherlands, if you're a student, you're going into discussion with your teacher. So that's a very liberal way of interacting with each other. So I think that's really a cultural thing, really a characteristic of the Netherlands. And you see that also in the designers. So they take and they get room to interact, to discuss with their commissioners, and that's very typical Dutch.
それには文化的でかつその教育にも関わる理由があると思います。例えばベルギーの場合を考えたときに彼らの国ではある種のヒエラルキー、その階級があるようなトップダウンのシステムで文化ですとか、教育の現場というものが運営されています。ですので、例えば教室の中で学生が何か先生が話しているときというのはもう黙ってそれを聞いている状態というのが、学校の風景なんです。しかしながらそれがオランダの場合どうかというと、非常にディスカッションをしたり、お互いに先生と生徒も話し合うようなことというのが、オランダでは一般的です。なので、こうしたそのリベラルな環境が、オランダの文化を形作っていると思います。そういう文化の中でデザイナー自身もそのコミッショナー、つまり仕事を依頼する人ですね、そういうお客さんともきちっと話し合ってお互いにいいものを作っていこうとする文化があると思います。
ありがとうございます。今視聴してくださっている方、他に質問あればぜひ上げていただいて、もし上がれば1つか2つか、質問をお伺いしてと思うんですけども、もしないようであれば、ちょっとエステルさんにちょっとまたお話しいただこうと思うんですけど、今回その、ブックフェア、東京アートブックフェア自体がそのバーチャルで開催されるっていうふうになったんですけど、数少ない、実際に場を設けて、やってる展示の一つが今回のベストダッチブックデザインの本を見てもらうっていう、場所を設けているんですね。でなかなかその日本だと手に取る機会がないそのオランダの、デザインを評価された本っていうのが33冊並んでるんですけど、日本の、オーディエンスの人たちにどんなことを意識しながら見てもらいたいとか、もしベストダッチブックデザインの、代表としてご意見があったらぜひ聞かせてください。
So this is again question from Yusuke. So question from Yusuke. Because now we are having exhibition in Tokyo, not online but offline exhibition. We have real exhibition now in Tokyo, and one of the exhibition is about BDBD. So we are now exhibiting 33 books, which was awarded in BDBD. So if you have any opinion, if you have any recommendations to Japanese audiences when we see that BDBD books in Tokyo, because this is such a rare opportunity for us to see these kind of books from the Netherlands.
So you want some tips from which books I like? Do you mean that? Yeah, okay. well, what I really like about this selection is Thomas talked about it in the talk, that you can see the international influences. So you can see there's a book from Korea. I think there's a Japanese book as well. Yeah, of course there are some Japanese designers. So it's very nice to look at those books and see if you can see, you know, something typical Japanese, typical Dutch. I don't know, but maybe you can have it. And I personally love the book from Irma Boom about the plants, the moss it's called. And I like it so much because the theme of the books are the plants, the moss. They're very light, very, you know, very fragile. And if you feel the book, it's the same. It's very light, and if the paper is very soft. So I like it because then concept, theme are exactly the same. So that's so beautifully made. Is that okay, or do you want more tips?
So では日本の皆さんに対して私がお話しできることというのは、その今回の BDBD で選ばれた本の中で、私が好きなことについて話したいと思います。まず一つ目に、トマスがこのBDBD のアワードに関するトークの中でも話していましたけれども、このセレクションは非常にインターナショナルな側面が見られます。ですから韓国のデザイナーですとか日本のデザイナーが作った本というのも選ばれています。そういう意味でその典型的な日本のデザインであったり、もしくはもちろんオランダで選ばれているので典型的なオランダのデザインであったり、そういうものが皆さんに楽しんでいただけるのではないかと思っています。中でも私がすごく大好きな本が一つありまして、それがイルマ・ボームさんがデザインされた苔をテーマにした本ですね。で、この苔をテーマにした本というのは皆さんご存知の通り、苔というのは非常に繊細で柔らかな質感がありますよね。これがもうまさに本で表現されているんです。で、こういう意味でそのコンセプト自体がそのその苔というコンセプトが本そのもので表現されているところが、私がこの本が大好きな理由です。
そのイルマの本は僕実はその僕がポットって本をやっていて、そこでぜひ売りたいなと思って版元に仕入れさせてくれっていうふうに連絡したんですけど、部数が少ないから卸ができないから直接買ってくれっていうふうに言われて、結局扱えなかった本です。なのでもし気になった方いたらちょっと、展示してる場所で、本の詳細載ってるんで、ぜひウェブサイトから直接海外から購入してもらえたらなっていうふうに思います。
Actually, the book you talked, made by Ilma Boom, this is really wonderful, and Yusuke wanted to sell it in his shop, in his bookstore. However, that book is quite rare, quite a small print run. That is why the publisher could not allow to sell it in post. So now he's recommending to the viewers to maybe check it in Tokyo Art Book Fair exhibition, and also try to buy it online from the Dutch publishers.
I don't think it's for sale anymore, because it's also made by a very individual, how do you call it, a private foundation. So here you can see that the commissioner is very important in the book selection, because this is a private foundation. It has a lot of money, so it can give the designer all the possibilities to explore, to use very special paper, special ink, etc., etc. The other side is that it's a very small print run, so it's not for sale.
そうですね。その本はもしかすると売り物ではないかもしれないんです。なぜならその本を作った依頼元、その本を作った著者というのは民間の財団のようなものでして、なのでその本は売り物ではないかもしれません。こういうようにその本を誰が作ろうとしたかというのは、実は本にとってもしくはデザイナーにとって非常に重要なんですね。なぜならこの私立のプライベートな財団が作ったからこそ、デザイナーに対して非常に特殊な紙ですとかインクですとかを使うような可能性が許されたので。
あと今視聴してくださってるから質問が来てるので、最後にこの質問を聞いて今日の Q&A を最後にしようと思うんですけども、 エステルさんから見て、そのアートブックだったりとか、そのアートブックのデザインというものに対する、なんだろう、注目度が高いエリアっていうのは、どこだと思いますか？もちろんオランダもその一つだと思うんですけれども、国際的に見て、その、ブックデザインというものに対しての意識が高い国っていうのは、どこだと思いますか？
So this is the question from one of our viewers today. And this will be our last question in the session. What do you think the most or more enthusiastic area, which focuses on book design or artist book? Do you think there's any particular area in the world that they are more interested in books or art books?
I don't think I understand the question that good. Do you mean that another country that really loves artist books, or sorry,
yes,
can you repeat again? Yeah.
So do you think is there any regions or countries which has quite strong interest in book design or artist book?
That there are any reasons or countries? More countries, you mean?
Regions or countries.
Regions, yeah. Sorry. Well, the other ones are of course the Switzerland. That's very famous for their design. Yeah, and of course in Asia a lot is happening as well. I mean, from Japan, things are coming from China. People are really ambitious to look beyond the boundaries that they know. So of course they're very traditional, more traditional in Asia, but they're really, and that's so nice to talk with Asian people too. Yeah, Asian people, I mean, it's a whole it's not a region, it's something very big, but to be very curious about what else can be done in book design. But if you look in Europe, I think it's Switzerland is the other, that's very important country for us as well. We look at that country for our examples. Is that an answer to your question? Yeah, okay.
その質問にお答えしますと、まずヨーロッパの中ではスイスがやはり非常に本に対して、またブックデザインに対しての意識が高いです。で、もう一つのエリアでいうと、アジアというのも非常に今ブックデザインとかアーティストブックに対して意識が高まっているところだと思いますね。特に日本ですとか中国ですとかはそういう国です。で、特にアジアの人たちというのは何か境界を越えるとか今までの限界を超えるようなことに興味を持っているように思うので、非常に楽しく思っています。
はい、ありがとうございました。今日、大体、平均して多分20人から30人くらいの方がずっと視聴してくださってて、このトークは記録にも残るので、これからまたたくさんの人が見てくれるんじゃないかなと思います。今回本当に展示へのご協力、トークへの参加ありがとうございました。
So, thank you very much for your time today. And this video on YouTube, now people are watching, maybe 20 or 30 people are watching this film, and it will be archived on the YouTube, so people can enjoy, Japanese people can continuously enjoy this movie. And thank you very much again for this conversation and also cooperation for the exhibition.
Thank you very much as well. I said in the beginning, I'm honored, and you make my heart alive. So thank you very much. I hope to see you again and to work together again. Okido.
本当にありがとうございます。最初に申し上げたように、このトークに参加できたことを非常に光栄に思っています。どうもありがとうございました。
じゃあまたお会いできるの楽しみにしてます。See you.
Bye bye. Bye bye. See you.